Hello and welcome back to Particular Pixels. I'm Xiaoling and this is my review of Weird West for PC. From its initial announcement, I've been keenly watching Weird West, partly because it's the first game by Wolfeye, a studio formed by the co-founder of Arcane, who worked on Dishonored and Prey, both of which I absolutely loved, and partly because it's described as an immersive sim, a genre which I also love. So yes, it definitely had me intrigued. It's taken me around 40 hours to finish the game, and here are my thoughts. Weird West's story is hard to talk about without heading into spoiler territory since it is integral to the experience, but I will say what I can. You play a total of 5 different characters throughout the game, each with their own story arc: a bounty hunter who is in search of their abducted husband, a pigman who needs to find out who he is and who made him that way, a native Indian who is tasked with killing a Wendigo, driving greed in the land, a werewolf who is trying to save his people, and finally a wanderist, a kind of occultist, who is trying to prevent something really bad from happening. Each story is played sequentially. Once you complete one character arc, you will begin with the next until you reach the game's conclusion, where you are presented with a summary of the consequences of your choices. You're also presented with smaller summaries at the end of each story arc. Now, even though each story is its own entity, all 5 stories are very closely intertwined with you as the common factor. Each time you progress to a new character, you know more about the world, your role in it, its inhabitants, and ultimately the overarching story. The world remains explored, changed based on the choices that you've made. With the previous characters, looted containers remain looted, uncovered locations remain uncovered, etc. Nymph roots, ace cards, and inventory items are kept across these playthroughs. I'll talk more about these in a little bit. Essentially, each playthrough built on the last, which is nice. The game is played from a 3D isometric perspective in real time, when wandering around the various locations or via the mouse on the overland map. You move your character around with WASD, aim with the right mouse button, slow motion dodge with shift, which uses action points, use the numbers 1 through to 4 to use special abilities, which use action points, and tab to go into sort of a tactical slow motion mode where aiming is also slowed, which does not use action points. Although combat was enjoyable and it was great to watch enemies ragdoll in death, it was somewhat clunky, especially when it came to changing weapons mid-fight. The biggest issue I had, however, was if you intend to actually make use of any of the weapon or character abilities frequently, or use slow motion dodge, you'll need to be consuming copious amounts of refill action point potions like an addict, or be forced to choose between dodging or abilities because you aren't going to have enough to do both. And there is also no way to upgrade the total amount of action points that you have, and I'm not sure why they chose to do it that way. However, you'll realize pretty early on that you barely need to use any of these abilities, aside from many of them being very situational or not particularly useful or interesting, since dodging and shooting is by far the most effective and easiest way to deal with any combat situation in the game. Every battle essentially just evolves into you dodging and shooting everyone regardless of what character you're playing. There are a few exceptions, of course, where using abilities can help, but for the most part, the impact that they have is quite small, and this was definitely a disappointment for me. They could have done so much more with the choice of weapon skills and character abilities in the game, and I think it was definitely a missed opportunity. All the weapon skills are identical for every single character that you play, so there's zero variety there. So unless you plan on specializing in different weapons for each new character you play, which is what I did, despite it not being the most efficient route, but even then they all feel mostly the same. It's all ranged, so dodge, kite, shoot enemies and barrels, and maybe use an ability now and again. There is stealth in the game as well, where you can hide in bushes and out of line of sight. It's serviceable, not perfect. Sneak around, choke out everyone that you can find. There is no way to actually kill enemies in stealth, you only knock them out. I played stealthily whenever possible, since I enjoy this kind of playstyle for the most part. The enemy AI is a little bit daft in combat though. Often they'll just run at you out in the open and not utilize cover, and make for easy pickings. Characters are upgraded in 2 ways in the game: ace cards and nymph roots, which are found via exploration or offered as mission rewards. The ace card upgrade a number of passive abilities that carry over between characters, and the nymph root are used to upgrade and unlock various character specific abilities and weapon abilities. The combination of weapon and character skill choices can be built kind of around your playstyle and does allow for, I suppose, some variation in how you play. There are only 5 types of weapons in the game in total, not including thrown items like dynamite. So there's 2 types of revolvers, 2 types of rifles, a shotgun, a bow, and melee weapons, all of which come in various rarities, so common, uncommon, rare, and legendary. And all of them can be upgraded to the next tier with ore that you find from mining in the game world. With the exception of the rare items to legendary, you have to buy legendary when they become available in the story mode. You also get armor as well, which negates a percentage of the damage you will take. And the armor can be upgraded to legendary by using various animal hides that you can be acquired from killing various animals in the game world, like bears and deer and snakes and things like that. Armors made from different hide offer different boons, like for example higher resistance to poison from snakeskin armor at the cost of overall damage reduction, for example. In practice though, the poison and the lightning and the fire resistance was never really an issue in my playthrough. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think I even used one anti-venom potion in my time with the game. There are charms and trinkets as well that can be found, which add a variety of effects, like doing more damage at night or doing more damage when your reputation is higher or lower and that kind of thing. These also come in various rarities and can be found or purchased at certain places. Each character can equip 2 of these, however I didn't really find that they were particularly useful. The inventory management and loot implementation in the game is somewhat of a nightmare and probably one of my bigger gripes with this game. There's a ton of junk that you are going to find that needs to be sold. And 4 is the maximum per item stack, so your inventory is quickly going to get filled with stuff. And you don't have a lot of inventory space. You'll also find tons of grey ranged weapons that only sell for $2 each, which is next to nothing. So you'll end up dismantling them for ammo, which give you 1 or 2 bullets only. You cannot mass dismantle items or mark items for mass dismantling. You need to hold down G for 2 seconds for every single weapon that you want to break down. If you hold it down too long, you might accidentally scrap a weapon you don't want to scrap because it will automatically go to the next weapon. And I don't know why they couldn't just give the player ammo directly as loot instead of having to go through this tedious process. According to the latest patch notes though, they have shortened the amount of time that's needed to dismantle these items. Yay. You can store items on your horse, which cannot be faulted. Your character, which can be faulted, in your bank stash, and on your party members, which neither can be faulted. Which seems a little bit inconsistent because filtering is quite important, otherwise you just end up with this big mass of items that you have to sort through. You also spend copious amounts of time trying to sort out your inventory, transferring items to your horse or your party members and such. And also if you move items from your character to your stash, you can only move 1 item at a time. But if you move items from any of your stashes to your character, it just moves the entire stack, which is another inconsistent thing in the game. To make matters worse, for me there was an issue with the bank stash where I lost all the items that were being stored, and it happened twice, which was somewhat annoying. So I basically stopped using it. You do get to keep all the items across each of your character's playthrough, in addition to ace cards and nimbroots, as I mentioned earlier, which is nice. But you don't get to carry over your cash or your ammo, and I'm not sure why they chose to do it this way. So effectively, by the end of a character arc story, you'll have a few $1,000s to spend, and if you don't spend it, you lose it. So naturally, you'll spend it to buy some stuff, and then you'll need to make more space in your inventory to store the stuff, or you don't sell certain things because it's worth a lot, and you sell it with your new character start, so they actually have some money to buy a horse or something like that. So what I ended up doing was storing my items across my main character, my 2 posse members, and my horse. And then once I started a new character, I'd go and recruit my previous posse members, and you can only have 2 at a time, and there would be a total of 3 characters with all my items on them. So I would have to empty one character's inventory entirely into my current character, dismiss them, and then hide the last one. It was tiresome and definitely annoying. I think it should have been handled much better. I don't understand why they didn't allow the storing of cash at the bank, since it is a bank after all, and why not allow the option to upgrade the storage spaces in your bank or your horse saddles to negate this loot problem, which would negate also having to jump through all these kinds of hoops to move your items around. You know, encouraging exploration and looting in the game is all fine, but not providing an adequate solution to all the stuff that you find seems, again, like a bit of an odd decision. You can also hire mercenaries or previous story characters to be part of your posse, as you've probably gathered at this point. Obviously, I tended toward hiring my previous story characters, aside from them having my loot, of course, because hiring some generic NPC didn't strike me as the best choice within the context of the story. You can give them weapons, medkits, and armor to use, and then in combat they'll use whatever weapon you've told them to, and kind of do their own thing. But it was a little bit of a disappointment to see that they didn't actually use any of their abilities in combat. They would just act as cannons like any other random NPC. Throughout the map, there are also a number of locations uncovered as you explore. Towns, mines, haciendas, caves, and such. The story ones, or the story locations at least, are all unique. Unfortunately, many of the other locations seem to be duplicates. So the more I started to see these copy-pasted locations, the sort of less incentive I had to explore. The bigger towns consisted of general store where you'd sell your junk, gun shops where you could buy and sell weapons, a blacksmith where you could turn your ore into ingots to sell or use the ore to upgrade your weapons. And there was a doctor where you could buy health packs and potion tonics, which I didn't use, as I mentioned earlier. You could also buy potions which allow you to see enemies through walls, which I don't think I used one in my 40 hours of playing. And of course the action point potions, which were arguably the most useful in the game. There are also a number of side quests, random bounties, and travel events in the game. The side quests and bounties were another way in which you could earn some reputation, some cash, and some items. The side quests for the most part were unique, but the bounties were incredibly repetitive. Capture or kill person X in location Y, and location Y was always the same place. It was a mine or hacienda. So yeah, if you managed, that was a little bit repetitive. If you manage to capture or kill a game boss, a vendetta would start, and then at some point while you travel, you'll get a random encounter related to it. This happened quite frequently, obviously, and again, it also becomes the same old thing happening over and over again. Throughout your travels on the overland map, you also encounter some other random events. Unfortunately, I think the pool they drew these from is quite shallow, and as a result, they also became pretty repetitive pretty quickly. And it wasn't really that long until I'd actually seen them all, like not even an hour or two into the game. Performance-wise, the game ran fine for the most part, with the exception of Grackle, the starting town, which suffered from some big performance dips, which it did in the beta as well. Into the mid-40s at 1080p, which is a little bit low, to be honest. More importantly, though, the game suffered from a number of bugs, some of which I would consider to be quite serious. As I mentioned earlier, the bank stash was broken and caused me to lose items twice. And also upon starting the final character story arc, I lost all of my ace cards and nymph roots, and I had quite a few of them, so I couldn't upgrade that character. Now, according to the latest patch notes, this issue has been fixed, but I don't know, I haven't had a chance to test it. There were also at least 2 instances where my mouse just stopped working entirely, or my character was suddenly unable to move or run or anything like that, which required me to restart the game in order to fix it. The AI teammates would often just stand still in combat and do absolutely nothing, or just stop following me during exploration entirely. And finally, there were occasional camera issues, and the game also crashed on me at least 3 times. These were the most glaring issues I came across, and I have no doubt that most of them will probably be fixed in time, but I was surprised that some of the more serious ones were present at launch. All in all, Weird West was somewhat of a mixed bag for me, despite the fact that I was looking really forward to it. I won't say that I didn't enjoy the game. It was fun, but I really do feel the game didn't meet its potential. It was hamstrung by the bugs that I cannot overlook, and while they will likely get fixed in time, they did hinder my enjoyment in my playthrough. The character abilities I think could have been far more interesting and impactful practically in the game, but most of them were just kind of average, meh. The combat, while fun at times, was clunky. The repetitive bounties, events, and locations made my journey far less interesting, and even though the story managed to hold my attention all the way through, and the ability to replay the game with different choices is definitely intriguing, I think that the moment-to-moment gameplay is not going to be enough to inspire me to play through the game again. Well, at least not so soon after finishing it. Overall, the game is certainly above average, and I think it is worth playing at some point. but I would not recommend it at its current price of $40. I would definitely wait for a sale. But anyway, that's been a look at my opinion of Weird West. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Maybe some of you found it helpful. If you do have any questions or comments, you can let me know in the section below. I've been Xiao Ling. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.